How do you cope with being alone? Do you get lonely or do you love it? How have you managed ISO? As we look at solitude, it's important to note that as a spiritual discipline, it's not just about being alone, but it's more specifically, it's about being alone with God. Some people are easy to be alone with, especially when we have history with them and trust them. We don't need to talk all the time. But then there are other people, and I'm sure you've experienced it, where you just want the phone to ring or someone to come and rescue you. Which option best describes how you feel about being alone with God? With people and with God, it often comes down to our sense, pardon me, of who we are and how we fit relative to them. Under pressure, as we saw on Sunday, Elijah lost track of both. He fell into depression, despair, and self-pity. His lament was, I'm the only faithful one left, and now they're out to get me. I've been there myself on many occasions, and I'm wondering if you have too. When I find myself thinking like that, I know I need to hit the reset button. But how do you do that? A long walk in the desert is great if you can get it. I've had several friends who've done the El Camino pilgrimage across Spain, and they've loved it. But if, like us, you have kids or a demanding lifestyle, that may not work. Being awake in the night with sick kids or working 12-hour days may leave you wondering, how could you possibly embrace silence and solitude? And that's okay, because solitude is more about a mindset than a landscape. Don't be tempted to avoid the spiritual journey by saying, it can't happen now or here or with me. If silence and solitude can only happen in the desert on a long walk, it's a pretty limited opportunity. But we can create our own version of it. It begins with naming the addictions we use to comfort ourselves and the distractions which keep us from being alone with God. Solitude can help us discover who we are and whose we are. Susanna Wesley was the mother of John and Charles Wesley, who started the Methodist Church. She had 19 children, that's right, 19. Yet she made time each day to spend with God. She would sit in her rocking chair, it said, and pull her apron over her face and pray. And her children knew it was her time alone with God. Don't disturb Mum. Maybe for you, it's the shower, the loo, or the car trip which provide the time and space to be alone with God. So why bother making space for silence and solitude in your life? Essentially, it's about cultivating an awareness of God through stilling your heart to all the other voices, both internal and external, which clamour for your attention. One of my favourite childhood stories was about a Native American. As he walked between the skyscrapers and city traffic with a European friend, he stopped and exclaimed, "Listen, there's a bird." He pointed up and his friend was amazed as he looked up to a high ledge and saw the very bird he was talking about. His friend said, "How did you hear that bird song in the midst of the traffic?" The Native American's reply was, "It's all a matter of what your ears are tuned to. Let me show you." Then he pulled some coins from his pocket and threw them down on the pavement. People immediately stopped and looked and turned around as the money tinkled. So my question for each of us today is, what are your ears tuned to? One of my life verses is Psalm 46, verse 10. It's written in the context of world upheaval, and the psalmist brings the voice of God saying, "Be still and know that I am God." The Message translation puts it like this: step out of the traffic. Take a long, loving look at your high God, above politics, above everything. Silence and solitude work together to help us step out of the traffic. They tune our hearts and minds to the presence of God and the voice of a personal and loving God. So practically, what does solitude look like when you don't have a desert journey available to you? Here's some tips. Firstly, you need to establish some daily rituals that slow you down. It doesn't have to be sitting quietly in a chair. That may not work for you. One of mine, a simple one, is slowly sweeping the kitchen floor in the morning while the kettle boils for our morning cuppa. It only takes a few minutes, but I make it an intentional spiritual practice for quieting my heart before God at the start of the day. For you, it might be pulling weeds or brushing down the pool. It could be worship music on the commute to work with headphones on. Or maybe it's time in the car after you've dropped the kids at school. Whatever helps you relax and focus on God can work. The underlying assumption is that God is always present with us and speaking to us, but we are either unaware or distracted. Secondly, maybe we need to connect with others who are committed to solitude with God. This might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes you need the presence of others to help you be alone with God. For example, Sal and I will sit or lie quietly together or with Maddie and use the pause app. It helps us to be silent. Some people join a group to establish these practices, just like other people have an exercise buddy. Thirdly and finally, be intentional in eliminating or minimising habitual distractions. What's your go-to when you have an unoccupied moment during the day? Is it social media, checking the news, or checking or sending emails or texts? Maybe it's getting busy like Martha, who couldn't sit still at the feet of Jesus. Whatever it is, in the name of efficiency, we've become ineffective. In the quest to be instantly accessible and available to others, we are no longer present in the moment with ourselves, with God, or with the ones we love. Twice a year, and I'm doing it at the moment, I take a month off social media and these gap-filling activities, usually because I need to. I aim to fill the space created with moments of silence and solitude in the midst of the day. I aim to cultivate a deeper awareness of God, listening, as it were, for the bird's song in the midst of the traffic, not just the tinkling of money. What about you? What helps you to be more conscious of the presence of God? The God who made you, loves you, and calls you his own. I'd love to read your responses in the comments below. Great to talk with you. See you again on Sunday as we look at the theme of Sabbath rest. God bless you. Have a great week.